She caught me staring, and with one playful comment, everything between us changed forever. The sun was just beginning its descent, casting a golden hue over the neighborhood as I stood on my porch, watching the quiet evening unfold. It was a typical afternoon, yet something felt different, something was pulling at me, a magnetic force that I couldn't explain. It was her. Across the street, in the garden of my neighbor's house, she sat, engrossed in a book. Her figure was framed by the soft, golden light, and the way the sun kissed her skin made her look almost ethereal, like something out of a dream. I had seen her before, of course, my neighbor's mom, a woman in her early 40s, but today, there was something about her that caught my attention in a way it never had before. Her hair, dark and flowing, cascaded over her shoulders in gentle waves, catching the sunlight. She wasn't aware of me watching her, at least, I thought she wasn't, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. My gaze lingered longer than usual, drifting over her calm, composed demeanor and the way her lips curled softly in the midst of whatever she was reading. I tried to tell myself it was just curiosity, just a fleeting moment of appreciation, but I knew deep down it was more than that. She was striking, not in an overly obvious way, but in a way that made you notice her. There was an elegance to the way she moved, a quiet grace that seemed to put everyone else at ease. But it wasn't just her appearance. It was the way she carried herself, the confidence that radiated from her. She was a woman who had seen life, who had lived through experiences that shaped her into who she was today, a mix of wisdom, strength, and quiet vulnerability. I shifted nervously, feeling a rush of heat to my cheeks as I realized I had been staring. What was I doing? My heart raced slightly, and I looked away, pretending to adjust something on my porch, anything to divert my attention. But I could still feel her presence, as if her gaze had caught mine, even from across the street. I glanced back, and that's when I saw it, her eyes meeting mine, sharp but not angry, curious but not judgmental. I froze for a moment, caught in the intensity of her gaze. It wasn't an accusatory look, but one of knowing, almost as if she had been waiting for me to notice her, or rather, for me to acknowledge that I had been noticing her for some time. Then, she smiled. It wasn't the flirty, exaggerated kind of smile you'd expect, but rather something subtle, something playful, like she knew exactly what I was feeling. "You always stare at me." "Naughty boy," she teased, her voice carrying across the street, gentle but playful. Her words hung in the air, more teasing than serious, but my heart skipped a beat. Was she joking? Or was there something more in her tone, something that hinted at an unspoken connection? I couldn't be sure, but the way she said it, the way she looked at me, there was something there, something I wasn't ready to confront, not yet. I laughed awkwardly, unsure of how to respond. "Sorry, I didn't mean to, don't worry," she interrupted, her smile softening. "It's just, you're not the first." She said it so casually, as if she had been aware of the subtle glances all along. I felt a mix of embarrassment and excitement, unsure of whether I should walk away or keep talking. But before I could gather my thoughts, she turned her attention back to her book, as though the moment had passed, but the lingering tension between us remained. As I stood there, feeling the rush of emotions bubbling beneath the surface, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Something had shifted in that brief exchange. She wasn't just my neighbor's mom anymore, she was a woman who had caught me off guard, who had noticed me noticing her. And now, the question lingered, what would happen next? The days passed in a blur of casual exchanges, but something lingered in the back of my mind, her teasing smile, the way her eyes met mine with that knowing look. I tried to ignore it, to focus on my own life, but the thought of her kept creeping into my thoughts. She was my neighbor's mom, after all, and I had no business feeling the way I did. Still, I couldn't help myself. It was a quiet afternoon when it happened. I had just returned from the store when I saw her standing by the mailbox. She was adjusting the flowers in the small garden by the curb, her delicate hands gently brushing away the leaves that had fallen from the tree. Her movements were slow, graceful, effortless, almost, and once again, I found myself watching her, my breath catching in my throat. As I walked closer, I felt a familiar flutter in my chest, an anxious excitement that I hadn't expected. She turned, noticing me approach, and smiled warmly. "Hey there, didn't expect to see you out here today," she said, her voice light, friendly, but with an underlying warmth that seemed to reach through the casual tone. "Just grabbing a few things," I muttered, my voice suddenly sounding too loud in the quiet street. I felt a little embarrassed but tried to play it cool, shoving my hands into my pockets as if it would somehow make me appear more composed. She laughed softly, the sound like a melody in the stillness. "I should have known," she said with a wink. "You're always running around doing something. Keeping busy." "Yeah, always," I replied, trying to steady my nerves. The conversation was simple, but it felt like there was more going on underneath the surface, a current of something unspoken that neither of us dared to address directly. We stood there, awkwardly silent for a moment, the distance between us filled with an unspoken tension that neither of us acknowledged but both felt. I noticed how close we were now, just a few feet apart, but the air between us felt thick, charged with the weight of everything we hadn't said. Then, out of nowhere, she took a small step forward. It was as if she wanted to say something more, but hesitated. Her eyes locked with mine for a brief moment, and I felt my heart skip a beat. The way she looked at me, like she was seeing something deeper, something I wasn't ready to face, left me breathless. "So," she began, her voice softer now, almost conspiratorial, "have you been keeping up with your studies? Or are you just here for the weekend, enjoying the peace and quiet?" I swallowed hard, caught off guard by the sudden shift in the conversation. I'm just getting through the week," I said, my voice trailing off. My thoughts felt scattered, and the weight of her gaze was making it difficult to focus. She smiled, and for a moment, I could have sworn there was something more behind that smile, something that went beyond the small talk. But then, just as quickly, the moment passed, and she turned back to the flowers, giving me a chance to regain my composure. "Well, don't be a stranger," she said casually, her tone light, but her words felt heavier than they should have. I nodded, but the butterflies in my stomach didn't leave. The encounter had been brief, but it had lingered, leaving me with a sense of confusion and yearning. She was older, wiser, and yet, in that fleeting moment, she made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. Something was happening between us, something neither of us could fully understand yet, but both of us could sense. As I walked back to my house, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just taken another step towards something that was both exhilarating and terrifying. It had been a few weeks since that awkward yet thrilling encounter by the mailbox. Our interactions remained mostly brief, filled with the small talk that usually accompanied neighborly pleasantries. But each conversation, every glance, carried an unspoken layer of tension that neither of us addressed, though it was becoming harder to ignore. One afternoon, I was sitting in my room, catching up on some work, when I received a text. It was from her. "Hey, if you're free this afternoon, would you like to come over for tea? I'm making something special, and I'd love to have you join me." My heart skipped at the simplicity of her message, and at the casual invitation. There was something about the way she worded it that felt personal, as though this wasn't just a friendly gesture but a quiet, intentional opening. I hesitated. What did she mean by special? Was this an innocent invitation, or was she trying to test the waters, see if there was something more between us? But I couldn't ignore the pull. After a moment of indecision, I replied, "I'd love to. What time should I come over?" She quickly responded, "How about in an hour? I'll be here." I could feel my pulse quicken as I made my way across the street. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden light that seemed to add to the quiet magic of the moment. As I reached her front door, I paused for a brief second, my mind racing with questions, but before I could overthink it, the door opened. She stood in the doorway, a soft smile on her lips, looking effortlessly beautiful in a loose, casual blouse and comfortable jeans. There was no formal greeting, no overdone welcome. It felt natural, easy, as though we were old friends. "Come in," she said, her voice inviting. I could hear the faint sound of classical music drifting from inside the house, adding to the warmth of the moment. Stepping inside, I was immediately hit with the scent of freshly brewed tea and something sweet, a rich, warm smell that made me feel both at ease and deeply aware of the quiet intimacy of the moment. She led me into the living room, where a small table was set with teacups and a plate of homemade cookies. The setting felt simple, yet there was an elegance to it. Everything about the space reflected who she was, warm, welcoming, and refined. "Make yourself comfortable," she said as she took a seat across from me, her gaze soft, but not without a certain depth to it. She poured the tea, and as I took my first sip, the flavors were soothing, calming, like the conversation we were about to have. We talked, as neighbors do, but this time, the conversation was different. There was an ease to it, a rhythm that flowed naturally between us. She asked about my life, my ambitions, my passions, and I found myself opening up to her in a way I hadn't expected. It wasn't just the surface-level chatter anymore. She made me feel heard, understood. Every time I spoke, her eyes remained fixed on mine, as if she was genuinely interested, not just being polite. As we sipped our tea, the air between us seemed to thicken with unspoken things. A glance here, a small smile there. It wasn't overt, nothing rushed, nothing forced, but it was there, this unspoken acknowledgement that we both felt something deeper, something that hadn't yet been put into words. The afternoon stretched on, and as the light began to fade, I couldn't help but feel like this invitation had been more than just a casual cup of tea. It was a bridge between us, a quiet step towards something new, something uncertain, but undeniable. The days following our tea session were a blur of conflicting emotions. I couldn't shake the way things had shifted between us. Every time I saw her, my heart seemed to race a little faster, my breath a little shallower. She was my neighbor's mom, a woman who had lived a life filled with experience and wisdom, yet somehow, when she looked at me, I felt like she was seeing something deeper, something I hadn't even fully acknowledged in myself. It was a Friday evening when we found ourselves together again, though this time, the circumstances were different. She had invited me to sit on her porch to watch the sunset, a simple offer, but one that carried weight. I walked over, trying to keep my cool, but the closer I got, the more I felt the pull, the magnetism that seemed to draw me to her, and the quiet tension that had been building between us. She was already sitting in a wicker chair, her legs crossed comfortably beneath her. The soft evening light bathed her in a warm, golden glow, making her appear even more ethereal. She looked up when I arrived, and the moment our eyes met, I felt an unspoken shift. It wasn't just the physical proximity, it was the subtle understanding that lingered between us. This wasn't just a casual exchange anymore. This was something more. "Glad you could join me," she said, her voice light, but there was something deeper beneath her words. The smile she gave me was soft, inviting, but there was a flicker of something else, something unspoken. I sat beside her, just a little too close, feeling the warmth radiating from her presence. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was comfortable, but at the same time, it was thick with tension, as if we both knew something was about to happen, but neither of us was willing to take the first step. The breeze gently rustled the leaves in the trees, the soft rustling adding to the quiet intimacy of the moment. I could hear her breathing, steady and calm, and it made my pulse quicken. I shifted in my seat, trying to adjust to the sudden intensity in the air. She turned her head toward me, her gaze meeting mine once again. The look in her eyes was different this time. There was something there, something that made my chest tighten. It wasn't a simple glance, it was a look that felt like she was searching for something in me. For a split second, I thought she might say something, but she didn't. Instead, her hand reached out, brushing against mine. It was a small, almost imperceptible touch, but it felt like everything had just stopped. The world around us faded away, and all I could focus on was the warmth of her hand against mine. My breath caught in my throat, and I could feel the flutter in my stomach that I had been trying to suppress for weeks. Her touch lingered for just a moment, long enough for me to feel the weight of it, long enough for my heart to race even faster. And yet, she didn't pull away. Neither of us spoke, but the moment was electric, filled with a tension that was impossible to ignore. The silence stretched on, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was loaded, charged with an emotion neither of us had yet given voice to. I wanted to say something, anything, to break the silence, but the words seemed to escape me. All I could do was sit there, silently, waiting for her to make the next move, wondering if she felt the same pull I did. It was in that silence, that delicate moment between words, that I realized something had changed forever. Neither of us had to speak about it, but it was clear, this wasn't just a friendship anymore. It wasn't just a casual connection. The tension between us had shifted from quiet curiosity to something far more complicated, something we both had to confront sooner or later. It was a rainy Thursday evening when I received the text from her. "Are you free tonight? I think we need to talk. I've been thinking about our last conversation." My heart pounded as I read those words. I couldn't help but feel a mix of anticipation and dread. What did she mean by, "we need to talk"? I had been wondering if the tension between us was just in my head, if perhaps I was reading too much into things. But now, with those simple words, I knew she felt it too. The unspoken connection, the pull between us that neither of us had addressed directly. I quickly replied, "Sure, what time?" She texted back almost immediately, "I'll make us some tea. Come over whenever you're ready." My mind raced as I prepared myself to face whatever this conversation was going to be. I had no idea what she wanted to talk about, but I couldn't deny the nervous excitement that bubbled up inside me. As I walked across the street to her house, the air smelled of rain-soaked earth, and the soft patter of raindrops against the pavement added to the quiet tension I felt. It was as though the universe was holding its breath along with me. When I knocked on her door, it opened almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting. She was dressed casually, as usual, but there was something different in the way she carried herself tonight. Her posture was a little more open, her smile a little softer, as though she was giving me a quiet invitation into something deeper. "Come in," she said, her voice calm but with a hint of something more beneath it. "I've been meaning to have this conversation for a while now." I stepped inside, the warmth of her home wrapping around me like a blanket. The familiar scent of tea and something sweet filled the air, but this time, there was a new layer to it, a quiet anticipation. We sat down in the living room, the space bathed in the soft light from the lamps and the muted glow from outside. She handed me a cup of tea, her fingers brushing against mine as she passed it. The simple touch sent a wave of warmth through me, and I tried to steady my breathing. "So," she began, her eyes meeting mine, "I've been thinking a lot about everything, our conversations, the moments between us. And I can't ignore it any longer. I feel this connection. And I think you do too." Her words hit me like a tidal wave, but I didn't know how to respond. She was speaking the truth, but admitting it out loud made everything feel even more real. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I was afraid that if I spoke, I would give away too much. "I do," I finally said, my voice soft but sure. "I've felt it too. From the first time we really talked. But I didn't want to make things awkward. I didn't know if you felt the same." She gave a small, understanding smile, her eyes softening. "I think I've known for a while now, but it's not easy. You're young, and I'm not. But there's something between us that's undeniable. And I don't know what to do with it, honestly." The way she spoke, honest, vulnerable, but with a hint of uncertainty, made something inside me shift. This wasn't just a flirtation, a passing fancy. This was real, and it scared both of us. "I don't care about the age difference," I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. "I care about the way you make me feel, understood, seen, in a way I never have before." She didn't answer right away, and I thought maybe I had said too much. But after a long, pregnant pause, she placed her tea down on the table and leaned forward, her gaze intense but gentle. "Maybe that's what I've been afraid of. But I can't keep pretending like there's nothing here. You're not just a kid to me." You're someone who's made me feel alive in a way I haven't in years. Her admission hung in the air, heavy and raw. The space between us was filled with unspoken words, emotions we hadn't dared to voice before. I knew, without a doubt, that we were both standing on the edge of something monumental, something that would change everything. But I also knew that, for once, neither of us was willing to turn away. There was no turning back now. The tension that had been building between us for weeks had finally erupted, and as we sat there, locked in this moment of vulnerability, I knew we had crossed a threshold. The next step, whatever it would be, was ours to take. The evening had settled into a quiet stillness, and we sat there on her porch, the soft hum of crickets in the distance filling the silence. The conversation had slowed, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. The weight of everything that had been unsaid hung in the air between us like a fine mist. We were close, closer than we'd ever been, but the words that should have bridged the distance between us seemed to escape us both. She turned toward me, her eyes lingering on mine. There was a softness to her gaze, but it was intense, filled with something deeper, something that had been building over the past few weeks, something neither of us had been ready to confront. Her lips parted slightly, as if she was about to speak, but then she stopped herself, letting the silence stretch out a little longer. I think, we both know what's been happening, she said finally, her voice low but steady. The words were simple, yet they held so much weight. She wasn't asking me to confirm what we both felt, she was acknowledging it, with a quiet acceptance that made my heart skip. I didn't want to admit it, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper, but I think I've known for a while now. I've been trying to ignore it, trying to convince myself it wasn't real. But it is, isn't it? I nodded slowly, not trusting myself to speak. It wasn't just the attraction, it was the emotional connection, the bond that had grown between us in ways neither of us had expected. The vulnerability, the understanding, it was all there, unspoken, but undeniably present. Yeah, I whispered, my voice catching. I've felt it too. I didn't want to say anything either. But I can't pretend I don't feel it anymore. She reached for my hand then, her fingers brushing lightly against mine, sending a spark of warmth shooting up my arm. It was a simple gesture, but in that moment, it felt like everything we hadn't said, everything we had been holding back, was finally coming to the surface. For the first time, the tension between us felt like something we could embrace, something real, something that would shape the moments to come. The night had deepened, the cool evening air settling around us like a quiet embrace. We were still on her porch, but the atmosphere between us had changed, no longer heavy with uncertainty, but lighter, as though everything we'd been dancing around had finally found its place. The words we had avoided, the emotions we had both hesitated to express, had all been laid bare in that simple confession. Now, there was a peaceful kind of understanding between us, a bond that, despite its complexity, felt undeniably real. She moved a little closer, her shoulder brushing against mine, and for the first time in days, I didn't feel the weight of hesitation or fear. Her presence no longer felt like a distant dream I couldn't reach, it felt warm, familiar, like something that had always been meant to be. I'm glad you said that, she murmured, her voice soft, but steady. Her hand found mine again, this time resting comfortably in my palm. There was no rush, no urgency to fill the silence. We both knew there was no need for further words, just the quiet understanding that we had crossed a line, but not one that we needed to fear. It wasn't about erasing the complexity of our feelings, it was about accepting them, letting them be part of what made us who we were together. The night felt softer now, like the world outside had quieted to give us space to just be. Her fingers gently traced the back of my hand, sending a calm, soothing warmth through me. The touch wasn't desperate or eager, but tender, an expression of everything we had yet to explore, but had already begun to share. She leaned in, her breath warm against my cheek, and placed a soft kiss there. It was gentle, a quiet seal on the understanding that had passed between us. As she pulled away, her smile was subtle, but it held a depth of emotion that words couldn't capture. We didn't need to say anything more. We both knew this moment was enough. And in that silence, with her hand in mine, I realized that this, whatever it was something worth holding on to. We weren't rushing toward a destination, we were just here, in the moment, together.